The rise of Dana White, how he transformed UFC into a global phenomenon. Get ready to step into the ring because we're about to take a deep dive into the world of the UFC and an impeccable man who made it all happen, Dana White. This is the story of how one man's vision and determination changed the game forever. White's journey from underground brawls to mainstream success has been anything but conventional. He's a straight-talking, no-nonsense guy who's not afraid to ruffle feathers and make enemies. He's one of the most influential figures in combat sports history. In this video, we'll explore the rise of Dana White and how he transformed the UFC into a global phenomenon that's taking the world by storm. So put on your gloves and get ready to go toe-to-toe with the man behind the mayhem. Gone are the days when fight only meant boxing. Thanks to the UFC, the fighting has taken on a whole new meaning with its raw, brutal, and edgy mixed martial arts battles. The UFC has transformed a once shunned combat sport, formerly known as No Holds Barred, into a global cultural phenomenon and a major commercial powerhouse. Behind the glittering facade of the UFC's success lies the unsung hero, Dana White. He's the tenacious and bold visionary who tapped into the world's secret bloodlust and turned it into a massive force to be reckoned with. Helio Gracie and his family brought their unique form of jiu-jitsu to the US in the late 70s. Art Davie, an advertising executive, teamed up with the Gracies to create the Ultimate Fighting Championship, or UFC. UFC 1 was a no-holds-barred tournament featuring fighters of different styles and sizes, where the only rule was to win by any means necessary. In 1996, Senator John McCain led a crusade to ban the UFC in all 50 states, equating it to human cockfighting. The UFC responded to the legal backlash by modifying its rules to comply with state athletic commissions, introducing weight classes and banning certain moves like fish hooking, hair pulling, and eye gouging. The UFC struggled to gain commercial success, but a relentless champion emerged to take the sport to new heights. He refused to back down or give up, pushing the boundaries of what was deemed acceptable and propelling the sport into the mainstream. Because he was no ordinary fighter, he was Dana White. He was a scrappy street fighter, unafraid of taking on anyone who dared to cross him. White's true calling came when he met the Fertitta brothers at a young age, who shared his love of combat sports and had a vision for transforming the struggling UFC into a global phenomenon. Together they embarked on a journey that would test their mettle and push the limits of what was possible. With White at the helm, the UFC became a cultural epicenter, a beacon of power and prestige in a world of chaos and uncertainty. White was fueled by a burning desire to make his mark in the gritty world of fighting, and eventually started his own business out in his basement. As his reputation grew, he rented out local gyms to teach his craft, building a name for himself in the Boston scene. But success came at a price. One brutal night, White was set up upon by a gang of vicious thugs, leaving him with permanent hearing loss and Meniere's disease. Though he soldiered on, his troubles were far from over. As his business continued to thrive, he caught the attention of the infamous Winter Hill Gang, led by the notorious Whitey Bulger. If you want to know who Bulger is, we'd recommend you watch the movie Black Mass, starring Johnny Depp in Bulger's role. The Winter Hill Gang, led by Whitey Bulger, disrupted one of his boxing classes, demanding a hefty sum of cash. White brushed them off, but when Bulger's right-hand man, Kevin Weeks, issued a chilling ultimatum, White knew he had to act fast. Fearing for his life, he hastily picked up his bags and bought a one-way ticket to Las Vegas, leaving behind everything he had worked so hard for. Even in the glitz and glamour of Sin City, he couldn't shake the feeling that danger was never far away. For White, the fight of his life had only just begun. Hope you recall that Fertitta guy we mentioned earlier. He and his brother Frank were prominent casino owners in Vegas, and they coincidentally encountered White again at a wedding. The Fertittas were impressed with White's abilities, and they began training together. White became captivated by Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and began mingling with legends like Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, Randy Couture, and BJ Penn. He became their manager and gained extensive knowledge about the UFC, making some startling discoveries. The UFC was going bankrupt, so White informed the Fertitta brothers, who immediately bought a 90% stake in the company for $2 million. White was left with just a 10% share, but he was able to become the company's president. The UFC was in disarray at the time, but White and the Fertitta brothers were committed to transforming the company and establishing an empire. They faced countless challenges, from a lack of respect to legal and regulatory hurdles and the brutal violence associated with the sport. However, they were prepared to fight their way to the top. To give the sport mainstream appeal and turn a profit, the Fertitta brothers invested another $40 million in the UFC in 2004 and created The Ultimate Fighter, a reality TV show featuring two teams of scrappy fighters duking it out for a six-figure contract. Dana White was at the helm of the show, which featured fighters living together, training together, and ultimately fighting each other. This was not typical reality TV fare, as the fighters were living together, training together, and ultimately fighting each other. But getting the show on the air wasn't easy until Spike TV stepped in. Networks were hesitant to take a chance on a sport that was still considered too violent and unrefined. The Ultimate Fighter was an instant hit on Spike TV, with over 1 million viewers tuning in for the first episode alone. It was the raw energy and charisma of Dana White, who had dedicated his life to making the UFC a household name, that kept viewers coming back for more. Spike TV's young male audience and willingness to take risks made the show an instant hit, with over 1 million viewers tuning in for the first episode alone. The first season concluded with a battle between Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner, which is still regarded as one of the greatest fights of all time. It was a pivotal moment for the UFC, as it proved that there was an audience for this sport and that it could be profitable. Spike TV and the UFC agreed to renew the show for a second season, sealing the deal on a napkin. And the rest, as they say, is history. The Ultimate Fighter has become a cultural behemoth, launching the careers of countless fighters and cementing the UFC's place in the world of sports. It was created by the Fertitta brothers, Dana White, and the fighters who stepped into the octagon. The reality show led the UFC to mainstream success, and with the acquisition of other fighting promotions, the UFC became the premier promotion in the sport. Now, Ronda Rousey, Conor McGregor, Anderson Silva, and Francis Ngannou are all part of this. This paid off in a big way as the UFC reached a $100 million deal with Fox Sports and turned into a global phenomenon. The UFC sale to WME-IMG for $4 billion in 2016, the most expensive sale of a sports organization ever, turned UFC fighters into international superstars and White into a star in his own right. The UFC signed a $1.5 billion deal with ESPN in 2018 to broadcast 30 events on its networks and stream 20 others on ESPN+. Despite the growth, the promotion faced criticism for not paying fighters a fair share of the revenue. Dana White, the face of the UFC, has been at the forefront of both controversies, but his acumen helped turn the sport into a worldwide cultural phenomenon and a globally recognized brand worth billions. Without White's relentless drive and tireless pursuit of excellence, the UFC would have never become the mighty empire it is today. His legacy stands as a testament to the power of unbridled passion, hard work, and the audacity to dream big. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think the UFC should pay their fighters a larger share of revenue? Do you agree with Dana White's stance on fighter wages? Let us know in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Thanks for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.